Welcome and greetings from the Nanovic Institute for European Studies here at the University of Notre Dame. My name is Clement Sedmak and I serve as Interim Director of the Nanovic Institute. Welcome all to the screening of Werner Herzog's film, Meeting Gorbachev. The Nanovic Institute has a long tradition of bringing films that shed light on Europe to the Notre Dame community. This tradition was started by the long-term director of the Nanovic Institute, Jim McAdams, who is with us today. Ideally, we have an impressive colleague introduce the film director, and ideally, we have the film director join us for a screening and a subsequent panel to discuss the film. This afternoon, we are almost in this ideal position. We have Jim McAdams to introduce Werner Herzog. We have Werner Herzog, the legendary director of the film. We have the screening of the film, and we have a discussion afterwards. The less ideal downside we have to live with is the fact that this is a virtual event with its many possibilities of bringing people together, but also with its technical challenges. I owe a lot of gratitude to our technical support and communications team for making this possible. Grant Osborne, Mel Webb, Jen Lektansky, Tim Checkley. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Please allow me to explain the choreography of this afternoon. I will introduce Professor Jim McAdams, who will then introduce the film, and by doing so, will also introduce Werner Herzog, the film director. After that, we'll have the screening of Meeting Gorbachev. Please do not use the Q&A button for comments or questions during the screening. The webinar host will cut everyone's video and microphones so that the film will appear full screen in your Zoom window. After the film screening, we will have a discussion of the film with director Werner Herzog. This discussion will be moderated by Professor Josh Lund. Thank you so much, Josh, for doing this. The discussion will involve students and Professor Jim McAdams. There will also be the possibility for the audience to ask questions. The film is 90 minutes in length, so we expect the discussion to begin at approximately 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time. 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time. After the film, we will run about 2 minutes of film credits, then put up a slide to indicate the panel discussion will soon begin. If you need to take a break, please do so during this time. In a nutshell, first, introduction of Professor McAdams. Second, introduction of the film through Jim McAdams. 3, screening of the film. 4, discussion with film director Werner Herzog. Again, this discussion will begin approximately at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time. So, I'm delighted to introduce Professor Jim McAdams. He has shaped the Nanovic Institute for European Studies as director for 16 years. 16 years is the tenure of those who make history, like Helmut Kohl and Angela Merkel. The best kind of leadership ensures that an institution can continue to flourish, and this is what Jim has done. The fact that we are having the screening with famous Werner Herzog this afternoon is, in this sense, a compliment to the leadership of Jim McAdams. Not only because I'm a short person, can I say I'm a dwarf sitting on the shoulder of a giant. Jim McAdams is the William M. Scholl Professor of International Affairs in the Department of Political Science here in Notre Dame. He served as chair from 1997 to 2002. Jim is an internationally recognized scholar of the two-state period in modern German history and its aftermath. In 1997, he was the first political science professor to receive the DAAD Prize for Distinguished Scholarship in German Studies. A creative researcher and sharp analyst, Professor McAdams has published numerous books and articles, including Germany Divided, From the Wall to Reunification, Transitional Justice and the Rule of Law in New Democracies, Judging the Past in Unified Germany, The Crisis of Modern Times, and most recently, Vanguard of the Revolution, the global idea of the Communist Party. Professor McAdams loves to teach and he loves his students. He has received Notre Dame's Charles E. Sheedy Award for Excellence in Teaching, the Caneb Teaching Award, the Choice Teaching Award, and the Thomas J. Madden Award in Teaching in the first years of studies. Jim McAdams is a mentor not only to students, but also to us. We are very grateful, Jim, for your generosity in being with us this afternoon. May I please give you the floor to introduce the film Meeting Gorbachev.
Thank you so much, Clemens, and I'm delighted to be with all of you on this very special occasion at Notre Dame. And I thought about how I would introduce this, so I'll introduce it this way. Who would have thought that I would one day have the honor of introducing my favorite film director? And not only that, but his film about one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century. Well, certainly I wouldn't have imagined that. Our guest tonight, the director Werner Herzog, has made over 60 feature films on democracies. Maybe the information is old, maybe it's 70 now, I don't know. He has also co-authored many, many books, an activity that has become his primary calling in the time of COVID. I could tell you much more about Herr Herzog's accomplishments, but I'd like to leave that up to you to explore because there are so many. Instead, in framing my brief remarks tonight, I would like to share just a couple personal notes on why I love Herzog's films. And by the way, when Herzog speaks to his guest, look for the word love. I love Herzog's films. Honestly, I hadn't thought about this question until I was asked to make this introduction. After some reflection, I came up with two ideas, both of which I hope will be helpful in viewing the film tonight. The first is about the subject of Herr Herzog's films. The second is about what I consider to be, and I hope this is correct, to be his distinctive approach to the art of filmmaking, at least what stands out to me. So let me begin with Herr Herzog's subjects. One feature that stands out in many, many of our guest films is his inclination to, and I apologize for the pun, his inclination to zoom in on the personalities of certain individuals. And for that matter, you have to say quite unusual individuals. For example, one is Aguirre, a 16th century Spanish conquistador who leads the next expedition up the Amazon and along the way, brutally lives up to his nickname, the Wrath of God, Soin Goras. Another protagonist, an Irish baron, he also has a nickname, Fitzcarraldo, travels on the same river in search of some point of access to rubber trees. When the baron encounters a steep hill, he induces scores of enslaved natives to pull a 320-ton steamship over it. A feat, amazingly, that, I mean, one gives everything to make films, I guess, a feat that Herr Herzog literally accomplished, dragging the ship over the hill in the making of the film. Finally, in one of the first films that I saw by our guest, and really the film that has stuck with me the most, Herr Herzog depicts the story of a young man, Kaspar Hauser, who, after being held in absolute captivity for most of his life, suddenly appears on a town square in Nuremberg with no ability to speak or even eat or stand. Initially, the residents put Kaspar on display, but eventually this individual is discovered by a professor, not a professor at Notre Dame, but with the same orientation, I guess, or attitude, discovered by a professor who sets about civilizing Kaspar in the refined ways of modern man. Now, we Americans are imbued with the idea of the radical individual. This type of individual is embodied by the protagonists in many of our most popular films. Our heroic individuals, like Tom Cruise, Bruce Willis, and Brad Pitt, are invariably cartoon figures who, in the mythological way, American way, quote, pull themselves up by their superhero bootstraps, end quote, and inevitably get what they desire. In contrast, Herr Herzog's protagonists are anything but stereotypical heroes. Rather, they are, and this is one of the things I love, they are dreamers who, very importantly, have much bolder visions than America's superstars. In many cases, however, their stories have a different ending. Instead of realizing their dreams, they encounter tragedy, tragic circumstances. The conquistador Aguirre, played by the less than sane, those of you who have seen the movie will appreciate this, the less than sane actor, Klaus Kinski, is trapped in his search for the mythical kingdom of El Dorado. The robber baron Fitzcarraldo, also played by Kinski, and also pretty crazy, has the hopeless dream of raising money to build a Rococo-style opera house and fill it with a company of European opera singers. Then Herr Herzog presents Caspar Hauser's dream in a very different way, yet vividly, hauntingly, beautifully, through dreamscapes of Berber nomads crossing the sands of the Sahara Desert. And this image has stuck with me for decades. It's one of the most beautiful images I've seen in film. The second feature, I think, that stands out in Herr Herzog's films is what he seeks to do with these unusual individuals. Rather than telling their stories, he invites them to speak. That is, when you watch Herr Herzog's films, people like Aguirre, Fitzcarraldo, and even the formerly speechless Caspar Hauser speak for themselves. Herzog does not provide us with editorials, explanations, tricks, or learned psychological analyses. His subjects are what they are. You either like them or you don't, and which in the case of Aguirre and Fitzcarraldo is definitely my view, not nice people. Now, as I thought through this point, I was reminded of George Orwell's observation about great writing. Orwell says, one can write nothing readable unless one constantly struggles to efface one's own personality, to efface one's own personality. And then Orwell adds, good prose is like a window pane. By this, I think that Orwell means you should allow your reader to peer right into this window and then allow him or her to see the subject person for what this person is. I think Herr Herzog would tell us that great filmmakers too must seek to live up to this challenge of creating this window pane into someone's personality. In this light, as you watch the film tonight, I invite you to reflect on what makes Herr Herzog a great, truly great filmmaker. Once again, in tonight's film, as you will see, he has made a film about a dynamic and ultimately tragic individual, or who encounters tragedy. Somebody with a powerful dream of revitalizing both the system of government that he served and also revitalizing an idea, Marxism, that had become hopelessly sclerotic, corrupt, and pointless. Yet, almost as quickly as this individual succeeded in infusing this system with new energy, he was fated to watch it fall into oblivion. So as you watch this film, I suggest that you consider not only what happened to this man over the tumultuous period between 1985 and 1991 when he was in power. Just as important, I suggest that you also reflect upon how Herr Herzog effaces his own personality in conducting his interviews. and allows his subject to speak. Indeed, when we talk about Herr Herzog, Indeed, when we talked to Herr Herzog yesterday, it is telling that he emphasized the following point about tonight's film. He said, "It's not about me, it's about Gorbachev." And so tonight, I welcome both Herr Herzog and all of you to this wonderful film. Enjoy.